What if I told you that the European Parliament, the same institution that spent decades lecturing sovereign nations about open borders, that called Europe's patriots far-right extremists, that labeled concerns over mass migration racist, just voted by an absolutely crushing margin to begin Trump-style mass deportations across the entire continent? Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Right now, something historic is happening in Europe. The same bureaucrats who punished Hungary and Poland for refusing to open their borders just voted to do exactly what those patriot leaders have been demanding for years. The same elites who called Britain's Rwanda deportation plan barbaric just made it standard EU policy, and the political left is having a complete and total meltdown. But here is what the media will not tell you. This is not just about one vote. This is about a permanent shift in European politics. The Overton window has moved so far and so fast to the right that the progressive establishment no longer even has the vocabulary to respond. If you believe that nations have the right to secure their borders and that the globalist open borders experiment has been a catastrophic failure, smash that like button right now and let the algorithm know that patriots are paying attention. Every click helps spread the truth about the civilizational awakening happening across the Western world. Because what just happened in Brussels is a preview of what is coming everywhere. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how we got here and why the globalists can never put this genie back in the bottle. Stay with me, because this story involves decades of failure, millions of lives transformed, and one of the most dramatic political reversals in modern European history. Now let me take you back to Thursday, May 8th. That was the day the European Parliament did the unthinkable. They voted 389 to 26 to approve what is being called the Returns Regulation. This is a sweeping new legal framework designed to massively accelerate the deportation of illegal migrants from the European Union. Let me say those numbers again so they sink in. 389 to 26. That is not a narrow squeaker. That is not some procedural side vote. That is a full plenary vote in the Parliament of the European Union, and the so-called far right won decisively. The same institution that spent years demonizing anyone who wanted to enforce immigration law just voted to enforce immigration law in the most aggressive way possible. The vote clears the way for formal trilogue negotiations with the European Council on a new binding legal standard for migrant removals across all 27 EU member states. This is not optional. This is not a guideline. This is going to be binding law across the entire European Union. And the political coalition that made it happen was something Brussels bureaucrats swore would never, ever be allowed. A unified right-wing bloc stretching from the EPP, the European People's Party, that is the mainstream center-right, all the way through the European Conservatives and Reformists, the Europe of Sovereign Nations group, and the Patriots for Europe movement. All the different nationalist populist parties from all 27 nations coalitioned together. They voted in a uniform bloc alongside the center-right EPP, and they absolutely crushed the open borders left. They passed the single most hardcore Trump-style mass deportation policy in over a century. Now, to understand just how seismic this vote was, you need to understand how badly the old system had failed. Because the failure was not accidental. It was designed. For years, for decades, the EU operated on a policy of managed chaos when it came to illegal migration. Migration primarily from Northern Africa and the Middle East. Here is how it worked. A migrant would arrive illegally, they would be processed, they would receive a deportation order, and then almost nothing would happen. Almost all of them refused to comply with the deportation order. And why would they? There were no consequences. The system was designed to make actual enforcement functionally impossible. The European Migration Commissioner, Magnus Brunner himself, admitted the staggering scale of the continent-wide failure. Only about 1 out of 5 migrants who were told to leave the EU actually left. Let that sink in. 80% of deportation orders went unheeded. Over the last decade, 4 out of every 5 illegal migrants ordered deported simply stayed. They stayed because the legal system was stacked in their favor. They stayed because a labyrinth of appeals, delays, and protections made actual deportation nearly impossible. They stayed because Brussels had spent 30 years building an architecture of bureaucratic paralysis. And I am not going to let them off the hook here. This was not incompetence. This was intentional. They designed the system deliberately to make enforcement functionally impossible. They wanted the migrants to stay. They wanted the demographics to change. They wanted to fundamentally transform European civilization. And for a while, it worked. As a result of this deliberate policy, the Muslim population in Europe skyrocketed. It exploded over the last 20 years, growing by an astonishing 50% between 2005 and 2025. 50% growth in 20 years. Think about what that means for cities, for neighborhoods, for schools, for culture, for the daily life of ordinary European citizens.
And European citizens, the ones watching their cities transform, their neighborhoods change, their daughters afraid to walk home at night, they were told this was compassion. They were told this was progress. They were told that wanting their laws enforced made them bigots. The elites sneered at them. The media demonized them. The courts ruled against them. The bureaucrats ignored them. But the people never stopped pushing back. They went to the ballot box again and again and again. They voted for patriot parties. Even when those parties were called extremist, they kept demanding that their voices be heard. And as of just days ago, that failed globalist experiment has officially come to an end. Now let me tell you what is actually in this new regulation, because it is absolutely devastating to the open borders agenda. Under the returns regulation, the EU is now moving toward 4 major changes. 4 pillars that will completely transform how Europe handles illegal migration. First, stricter return procedures with real penalties. Under the old system, migrants could ignore deportation orders with no consequences. That is over. Migrants issued a deportation order will now be legally required to cooperate with their own removal. There will be strict enforcement and follow-up. If you refuse to cooperate, there will be real penalties. No more endless games. No more ignoring the law. Cooperate or face consequences. Second, extended detention of up to 24 months. Under the old system, migrants could be detained briefly and then released into the country pending endless appeals that could go on for years. They would disappear into the population. They would never be found again. That changes. Under the new regulation, those awaiting deportation can be detained for up to 2 full years. Those deemed particular security risk can be placed in enhanced security facilities or even prisons while the removal is being processed. No more catch and release. No more releasing dangerous people into European communities. Detention until removal. Third, and this is the crown jewel, return hubs outside the EU. This is the part that is making the progressive left absolutely lose their minds. It is comparable to Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. Under the new framework, EU member states can now negotiate bilaterally or in coalitions to establish deportation centers in third countries, countries outside EU borders. Rejected asylum seekers will be processed and held in these facilities until removal. Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, Denmark, and Greece are already in active talks with African governments to establish these facilities. Italy, under Giorgia Meloni, actually pioneered this model with its Albania agreement. She set up processing centers in Albania, where migrants are held while their cases are decided. If they are rejected, they are deported directly from Albania without ever setting foot in Italy. The same Brussels bureaucrats who denounced Britain's Rwanda plan as barbaric just voted to make it standard EU policy. You literally cannot make this stuff up. The hypocrisy is absolutely stunning. For years, they screamed that offshore processing was inhumane, that it violated human rights, that it was something only evil right-wing governments would do, and now they are doing it themselves. Because they have no choice. The old system failed so catastrophically that even the Brussels elites had to admit reality. Fourth, permanent entry bans for security threats. Not a temporary restriction. Permanent. If you are deported as a security risk, you are never coming back to Europe again. Ever. No appeals, no second chances. No re-entry under a different name or a different story. Permanent ban. Done. These 4 pillars together represent the most aggressive immigration enforcement framework in modern European history. And it passed by a margin of 389 to 26. The globalists lost. They lost badly, and there's nothing they can do to reverse it. Now let me tell you what is already happening, because the mass deportations have officially begun. And you're not going to believe where. Germany, the same Germany that was the epicenter of the migration crisis. The same Germany that opened its borders in 2015 and welcomed over 1 million migrants. The same Germany that was ruled by Angela Merkel, the woman who, more than anyone else, created this crisis. Germany's center-right Chancellor Friedrich Merz has just announced that upwards of 800,000 Syrian refugees will be repatriated. They will be sent back within the next 3 to 4 years. 800,000 people. That is not a symbolic gesture. That is a massive demographic shift in reverse. And here is what makes this even more significant. This is not the AfD doing this. This is not the alternative for Germany, the so-called far-right party. This is a mainstream center-right party, the CDU, Angela Merkel's own party, in cooperation with his coalition partners in the German Bundestag. Let me say that again, so it hits you. The political party that created this crisis is now reversing it. The party of Angela Merkel is sending the migrants home. Merkel's vision for a borderless Europe has crumbled into dust. And it is her own political party that is doing the crumbling. The AfD pushed the Overton window so far to the right that even the mainstream center-right had to follow. Even the establishment parties had to adopt what they called extremist positions just a few years ago. That is how you win in politics. You shift the debate. You make your positions mainstream. You force the establishment to come to you. And that is exactly what the nationalist populist movement has done across Europe. It is not just Germany. There is nothing short of a groundswell of legislation being passed, pushing back against the transformation of Europe. Years back, the Swiss People's Party successfully banned the construction of minarets throughout their nation. They also banned wearing the burqa in public places. The Swiss people voted for these measures directly in referendums. France followed suit, banning the burqa in all public spaces. Belgium did the same, then Bulgaria, then Austria, then Denmark, then Luxembourg, then the Netherlands. And in October, Portugal became the 9th European country to pass a nationwide burqa ban. The law was proposed by the populist Right Chega party, with fines up to 4,000 euros and prison terms of up to 3 years for anyone who forces a woman to veil. 9 countries have now banned the burqa. 9 countries have said that certain practices are incompatible with European civilization and will not be tolerated. The political left is freaking out over this. The European Council of Refugees and Exiles is absolutely beside themselves. They cannot believe that Brussels, of all places, the European Parliament, has instituted these Trump-style remigration policies. But unfortunately for them, they just do not know what time it is. The political left is the odd man out on this one. The Overton window has shifted so far and so fast to the right that the progressive establishment no longer even has the vocabulary to respond effectively. They are still going to the same verbal toolkit. Racist, far right, bigot, extremist, Nazi. That toolkit is broken. Those words do not work anymore. People have heard them so many times, applied to so many reasonable positions, that they have lost all meaning. When you call someone a Nazi for wanting their immigration laws enforced, people stop listening. When you call someone a bigot for wanting their daughters to be safe, people tune you out. When you call someone an extremist for wanting to preserve their culture, people realize you are the extremist. The left overplayed their hand. They cried wolf too many times. And now, when they screen their warnings, nobody cares. All of this has gone mainstream now. Border security has always been mainstream. We know that. It just took a while for the bullies in Brussels to finally get the message. But based on what just happened last week, that message was received loud and clear. Now let me tell you what this means for the future, because a new era is dawning in Europe. With the rise of the populist right taking over European politics, power has shifted away from the borderless globalists to the border security advocates, away from the open borders ideologues to the Western civilizationalists. And what we are watching in Brussels right now is the political expression of a civilizational awakening. Millions of ordinary Europeans looked at their transformed cities. They looked at their criminalized speech. They looked at their daughters afraid to walk home at night. And they concluded correctly that something sacred was being deliberately dismantled. Their civilization was being dismantled. Their culture was being erased. Their way of life was being destroyed. And they decided to fight back. They went to the ballot box. And they kept going back. Again and again and again. Election after election. Year after year. They voted for patriot parties, even when those parties were marginalized. They voted for nationalist candidates, even when those candidates were demonized. They kept pushing, kept organizing, kept showing up. And now their members of parliament are rewriting the law and resecuring their continent. The elites thought they could ignore the people forever. They thought they could transform Europe without consequences. They thought the demographic changes would become irreversible before anyone could stop them. They were wrong. People fought back, the people won, and now the people's representatives are implementing the people's will. Mass deportations are beginning. Offshore processing is becoming standard. Permanent entry bans are being enforced. The architecture of open borders is being dismantled piece by piece, and there is nothing the globalists can do to stop it. Now, let me tell you why this matters for Americans. Because this is not a distant drama. It is a preview. The same debate over civilizational coherence, cultural continuity, border sovereignty, and the weaponization of elite institutions against ordinary citizens, that debate is already happening here. It is already live. It is already urgent. President Trump understood this before anyone else. He understood that immigration is not just about economics or labor markets. It is about the fundamental question of what kind of country you want to live in. Do you want a country with a coherent culture and shared values? Or do you want a collection of competing tribes with nothing in common? Do you want a country where citizens feel at home in their own neighborhoods? Or do you want a country where people feel like strangers in the land their ancestors built? Do you want a country where the law is enforced and borders mean something? Or do you want a country where anyone can walk in and claim rights they never earned? These are the questions that define our era. These are the questions that the globalist elites tried to suppress for decades. These are the questions that are now being answered loudly and clearly by voters across the Western world. And the answer is clear. The people want borders. The people want their culture preserved. The people want their laws enforced. In Europe, that answer just manifested in a vote of 389 to 26. In America, that answer manifested in the election of President Trump. In nation after nation, the answer is the same. The globalist experiment has failed. The era of open borders is over. The time of civilizational defense has begun. What Europe is demonstrating in real time is that no institution is permanently captured. The European Parliament seemed lost. Brussels seemed hopeless. The bureaucrats seemed invincible. And then the people kept voting. They kept organizing. They kept pushing. And eventually the institutions bent. The arc of demographics and democratic will can reassert itself, even against the most entrenched bureaucratic consensus. Civilizations, when they are threatened with enough clarity and consequence, eventually fight back. That is the lesson of what just happened in Brussels. That is the lesson Americans should take from watching Europe transform before our eyes. History does not reward the hesitant. It rewards those who understood the moment and acted. Europe, it appears, is finally acting. The mass deportations are beginning. The borders are being secured. The civilization is being defended. And for those of us who have been warning about this for years, who have been called every name in the book for stating obvious truths, this moment is vindication. We were right. We were always right. And now even Brussels is admitting it. The same parliament that called us extremists just voted for our policies. The same bureaucrats who called us racist just implemented our vision. The same elites who said our ideas were beyond the pale just made them law. That is what victory looks like. Not just winning elections, but transforming the debate. Not just gaining power, but making your enemies adopt your positions. The nationalist populist movement in Europe has achieved that victory. And the reverberations will be felt for generations. Now let me close with some thoughts on what comes next. The returns regulation still has to go through trilogue negotiations with the European Council. There will be attempts to water it down, to add exceptions, to slow the implementation. The globalists are not going to give up without a fight. They still control many levers of power. They still have allies in the media and the courts. They will do everything they can to delay and obstruct. But the momentum is undeniable. The political will is clear. The people have spoken, and their voice was heard. 800,000 deportations from Germany alone, processing centers in Africa, permanent entry bans, detention for up to 2 years. These are not half measures. These are serious policies designed to actually solve the problem. And as these policies are implemented, as migrants start being removed, as the tide begins to turn, the political benefits will compound. European citizens will see that change is possible. They will see that their votes actually matter. They will see that the transformation they feared can be reversed. And they will reward the parties that made it happen. They will punish the parties that resisted. The political realignment will accelerate. The AfD will continue to rise in Germany. Le Pen will be positioned for victory in France. Vox will gain strength in Spain. The Austrian Freedom Party, the Dutch populists, the Italian right, all of them will benefit from what just happened in Brussels. Because what happened in Brussels proves that the nationalist populist vision can be implemented. It proves that you can win. It proves that the establishment can be defeated. That message will resonate across Europe. It will inspire activists and voters everywhere. It will give hope to people who had started to despair. And it will terrify the globalists who thought they had won permanently. They have not won. They are losing. And as of last week, they know it. A new era is dawning in Europe. An era of borders and sovereignty. An era of civilizational confidence. An era of putting your own people first. President Trump has been leading this movement in America. Now Europe is following. The entire Western world is waking up to the threat it faces and choosing to fight back. And for those of us who have been in this fight for years, there's never been a better time to be alive. We are winning. The tide is turning. History is on our side. Don't stop here. The civilizational awakening is accelerating every single day. Click on the next video and join us as we continue to cover the transformation of the Western world.